Hey, what's up, fam bam? Welcome to the second installment of Metaphysics On Yo Mind. And we're doing a series that kind of launches it called The Bible and Meditation, where we're going to explore whether or not we have the evidence to concede that yes, the Bible is a literal book where everything in it is absolutely true as written. We're going to explore that, and at the same time as that, we're going to explore this practice called meditation. But again, if we roll back to our initial installment in part one, we were working on our set piece because basically, this set piece gives us the symbol of the heavens and of the earth that we're going to use to do our exploration, our investigation of what we talked about was metaphysical stuff. And again, don't trip on whether you understand this, all of it right now. All we're doing is connecting dots as we move through it. And then you're gonna see a picture develop that perhaps you haven't seen before, okay? I was reflecting back earlier today on when I was a kid. And I remember, my family went to church every week, like a lot of people. And I just, I recall a confusion as a kid reading some of these scriptures, hearing the preacher, the pastor, what have you. Some things sounded great. God is love, and God, created birds and the bees and us, and, there's that part of it. And then there's these other parts that seem really kind of strange. We heard a story about a snake that had a conversation with the first couple. We've heard stories about a man having a conversation with his goat, or actually it was a donkey, I should say. And we've heard about waters parting, seas parting, and people getting swallowed by a fish, so on and so forth. Just really incredible stories. Very vivid, especially in the imagination of a child. I'm sure a lot of you remember a lot of these stories. And I was reflecting back on some of the other scriptures that I used to read on my own as a kid, which I didn't necessarily hear these scriptures quoted in church, but just vibe this one. Let's go to, if you happen to have a Bible, or specifically a King James Bible, you're welcome to kind of check into this yourself. Otherwise, maybe you can write it down or whatever if you want to reference it. But, just as an example, let's look at Numbers, the book of Numbers 31, 17 and 18. Just feel this for a second. So, as a kid, this is God, quote unquote, talking. So Numbers 31, 17 and 18, this is God and Moses. I'm sure you've heard of the character Moses, who is a principal player in the Old Testament. And in Numbers 31, 17, verse 17 and 18, this is God talking to Moses. Now, therefore, kill every male among the little ones, and kill every woman that hath known man by lying with him. But all the women children that have not known a man by lying with him, keep alive for yourselves. So, there's obviously other passages that are equally I'll just say confusing. So the God that created us, the God that's love, is instructing Moses to kill the males, among the children, but keep the girls, keep the females, if they haven't known a man, meaning if they haven't had sex with a man, keep them for yourselves. So it's passages like that that I didn't have the tools as a child, but as we grow older, as we mature, as our knowledge base expands, I knew that somehow or another, a lot of these passages couldn't possibly mean exactly what they say. That was in my mind. It just did not square. And it caused a lot of confusion, at least to me and other people that I know of. And what that does is it leads you into, remember we had our sampling plate, right? We're going to be going to this plate of these disciplines that will help give us, some tools or keys to unlock some of the mysteries that are inherent in the Bible, in books like the Bible, scriptures. So we know psychology, we're talking about the mind. So that particular passage was not a great passage for, a 10 or 11-year-old to read and have that kind of juxtaposed, situated side by side with God is love and God forgives and so on and so forth. Now, we're not going to get into any kind of tug of war over who believes what and why and this and that and the other. We're going to explore, because to me it's about, let's go with the facts, all right? Opinions, whatever, everybody's got one. And same with beliefs. In my estimation, belief means usually you're not sure, but you choose to believe something in spite of the fact that you may or may not have evidence that would support your belief. So we're not talking about belief, and we're not talking about these presentations are not religious in nature. They don't advocate any particular religion or a particular view. What we're going to show, or the thesis for what we're going to show, is that the same common threads that run through the Bible, that run through the Bhagavad Gita, that run through the sutras of Buddha, that there's a common thread. And one of them, or of the many, is figures of speech, metaphor, allegory, parable. Linguistics, we called it, was the fancy name, but basically this is figures of speech, because you use figures of speech all the time. I use it all the time. When you go say, let's go hit the town, you don't mean literally physically hitting the town. And I know that means let's go out and have some fun. Let's go out and go to a restaurant, have a drink or whatever. When you say, let's go shoot the bull, you don't literally mean let's go, bow and arrow or whatever, shoot a bull. We know that means that let's have a talk, let's have a conversation. So these we use all the time, especially when I think about the young rappers. All of their lyrics, and it's the same with regular songs as well, but metaphor, allegory, and parable is inherent in the lyrics of music, because it's like poetry. You're using figures of speech. You're saying something, but you don't necessarily mean that. You're alluding to something else, right? So, when Rakim called himself the microphone fiend. Fiend normally would be, something that you wouldn't want to be. It means that you Jones and you. But we understood it as a figure of speech, that this cat is like gravy on the mic. He's working it, and the figure of speech that he used, was just what we just spoke about. And you could use other figures of speech, other metaphor, other allegory. So if we speak that way, if we're using, let's throw it up here so we can, really feel it. Figures of speech. Remember we said in installment 1 how ancient man knew that man learned best and retained the most when you use symbols and images. As they say, a picture says 1,000 words. So, just in this right here, figures of speech, we're talking about images, we're talking about symbols. They travel further than when you try to articulate something in, what we call prose or whatever. These things travel with the imagination and the participation of the person that is, attempting to decipher what's going on with symbolism, astrotheology, so on and so forth. It requires you to have some idea that the figures of speech that are used are not much different than the figures of speech that you use every single day. When you say, I'm broke, meaning you have no money, but you're not actually broken. But as a figure of speech, we understand that to mean, you got no paper. Okay. So the Bible is written in the same way. It uses figures of speech, it uses symbols, because those symbols mean something in all cultures, all civilizations. They're constant things. Okay. So we also have to look at the fact that when we're going to go in and explore this stuff, we gotta have a little discussion about laws of the universe. The universe is governed by laws. It's not improvisational. It's not helter-skelter. It's in the East, in the Hindu religion, and I'm sure you've heard the word, karma. The law of karma is basically in the West known as and reap what you sow. That's all. So in other words, in a different location with a different culture, it's the law of karma. In a different location or another culture, it's cause and effect. Reap what you sow. Okay, same law. Okay, the universe does what it does, and there's not much you can do about it. You can either recognize it or not recognize it, but you can't change it. So another law that we have to, it's absolutely necessary we get our grips around it, is I don't even say it's a law. It's our experience. Duality. We live in duality. Anytime that you have a condition apart from the one, in other words, when there's one, there's only one. As soon as you split that one and create two, now what you're creating is this and that. So we live in duality in the physical world, meaning black, white, hot, cold, up, down, on the color spectrum, red, blue. That's the parameters that we live in. If there's one side to a coin, there has to be another side to a coin. Just the way it is, there's always two sides. We're gonna talk about, as we move further, how duality operates on universal terms, which is, and we'll pull out some scriptures on that too. But first, let me give you an example of duality. Let's go back to the Bible, since we there. And let's just go to the beginning. So we're going to jump around. Again, you don't have to follow this in any kind of official or formal way, because we're going to be coming back and forth to different touchstones throughout this whole, series of presentations. Because this, like I said, this is a big story, a big movie, a big game, and you're in it. You're a player. You're in it, whether you think you're in it or not. You have a role to play, and it's the role that you decide to play. But duality, Genesis 1:1. So, but before we get into that, let's just imagine there's this we're gonna go as if, which is a kind of like a keystone that we'll use. I'm not asking anybody to believe what I'm presenting. Treat it as an as if, and just like a movie that you're watching that you might kind of really get involved in, but you're ultimately not in the movie. You're not one of the characters who has a gun to their head or whatever. But the as if is that you're participating in the experience of watching that flick, and it's as if you were in it, right? As if just is something that actors, directors, acting coaches work with actors on when they're working on their character, right? You have to treat certain things as an as if, because you may not have had that experience before yourself. You may not have ever killed anyone, but you're going to play this character who's a murderer as if you are that murderer. You are assuming that role. So the as if here in this particular instance is there's something called God. Okay? And we're going to say that, okay, at the beginning of all this, there's only God. There's no creation, or whatever you want to call it. Scientists would call it the Big Bang and this and that and the other. But let's just say there's something called God, and God is this. But it goes, to infinity in all directions. Genesis 1:1. In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. Now, if you listen to that, is there anything noticeable that kind of catches you? Because basically what he's doing, or what God is doing, is creating duality. Why? Because in the very first verse of this book, the very first one, it's saying that God created something called the heaven and then something called the earth. So God being one, now all of a sudden there's something called heaven and something called earth. Okay, whatever that is. And the earth was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep. And the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters, and God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. So, first we have the one, the only. This is our thesis, right? You may not personally believe that, but we're using it as the basis of our exploration. The one, now there's a distinction. There's something called heaven and something called earth. And this earth is without form and void, and darkness is everywhere, and so on and so forth. And then God creates light. To create light, to even say the word light, implies dark. Okay? So duality, right off the top in this particular book, heaven, earth, duality, dark, light. So that's the basis of where we're going to be moving forward through this. We're not going to belabor the point. I think everybody gets it. But the trip is when you're reading this stuff and you're reading these crazy stories or whatever, you have to remember there's two sides. Okay? You just have to kind of figure out where you are in that context. But there's two sides, and then we're in duality. Okay? We're in good, bad. And we're going to go, as we go further into Genesis, we're going to show where that first becomes apparent that there's something called good and bad. Because so far, everything is good. Heaven and earth, and it was good. God creates light, and it was good. So everything's good so far. So this was intentional on the part of this thing we call God, creating duality. And we, as we get further along, we're going to show that duality is in fact the problem for humans. We're going to get into why. But duality is where we run into difficulties. And that's where shall we say, the edge of life is in duality. We're going to end this particular installment, and then we're going to come back for installment 3. Once again, appreciate you checking us out, and really hope you stick around. We're going to have this is the greatest story that's ever been told, and it's your story and my story. And there's a way to interpret things, and there's a way to interpret things where one gains insight. And that's what we're out to explore, to see if we can do and make a little bit better sense of some of these things that we have been presented with traditionally and just accepted. And now, with time and experience, we know that there's a little bit more to meets the eye. There's a lot more, actually, than meets the eye. So, again, thank you for checking us out. And next up, installment 3. Peace.